So welcome back for the second round, a lot heavier than the first, so just be prepared for that. The Khmer Rouge took over in 1975 and they reigned until 1979. During that period, between 1.5 and 2 million Cambodians lost their lives. In other words, a quarter of the country's population. They were either executed or they died from preventable causes. The Khmer Rouge took power by overthrowing the US-backed pro-United States Lon Nol regime that was in place. Pol Pot, the leader of the Khmer Rouge, was educated in Paris and there were high hopes for him, but he ostensibly wanted to set up a Marxist utopia, but like most dictators, ended up being autocratic, totalitarian, xenophobic, paranoid, and extremely repressive. The Khmer Rouge believed that Cambodia was too corrupted by Western influence, and they wanted the country to get back to its roots. In order to achieve that, they decided to evict all city dwellers and kick them out into the countryside, where they were to dig out rice bunds and till paddy fields. Like any other dictatorship, the Khmer Rouge feared intellect, they feared free thought. And the well-educated were the first in line to be executed once they took over, together with the military officials from the previous regime. The Khmer Rouge officials would often address crowds of people in either French or English. And if the people responded to either language, then their lives would pay the forfeit for that comprehension. Like every other dictator, Pol Pot had a series of detention centers dotted around the country, the deadliest of which we had to visit as part of our training. It is known as S21 prison today, and it was intended to hold enemies of the regime, but it ended up being one of the deadliest prisons in recorded history. Of the 15,000 to 20,000 inmates that were in this prison, 12 survived. We met one of the survivors, a man who was kept alive because he knew how to fix the typewriter that the officials needed. You could really see that in this man's eyes that he had experienced true horror. And when he saw us and met us, he had tears in his eyes and he gave us genuine hugs and thanked us for coming to Cambodia. That was quite a heavy moment. A lot of the court's content was extremely heavy and quite difficult to deal with at times. I can't discuss the ins and outs of the material, but I can say that it was tough and that we had a number of psychologists on site to aid us in the process. I'm able to tell you some of the personal stories that I came across outside of the court. I met one man who told me that in his village, which was quite similar in many other villages, reportedly, that he, at the beginning, was given a bowl of gruel every day and a box of rice every day to eat. That was it, but he was given at least that at the beginning, as was every other worker in the village. With the passage of time and with the emergence of famine, the villagers had to share one box of rice between 8 to 10 people a day, and they were no longer provided with any gruel. The man said that such was the fear and the misery in the village that he believed that perhaps even unconsciously, a number of the villagers began to hunger strike, ultimately dying, which provided more food for everybody else in the form of the rice rations, but also through cannibalism, because the villagers would almost always eat the corpses of their dead compatriots. That in itself is heavy enough, but it was even worse to discover that in almost every instance, if a villager died, then their children, the orphaned children, would be murdered and eaten almost immediately afterwards. There are many other harrowing tales like that that I won't depress you with, but in every tragedy there are also glimmers of positivity, and there was one positive story that stands out in my head that I heard from somebody in an Irish bar over a whiskey one night. This man that I met was separated from his family at the beginning of the regime and placed in a village. He heard many rumors that his family were in a different village that he had visited before, about 50 kilometers away from where he was. Desperate, he fled the village he was in and went to this village. The rumors were true, and he did see his family. He was absolutely delighted to see them, but he was detected almost immediately and brought before the village leader, at which point he said that he knew he had nothing left to lose. So he just approached the leader, took out the knife that he had in his pocket, dropped it on the ground in front of him, and said, "You have kept my family alive. If you wish to execute me, execute me." Obviously, he wasn't executed because he was telling me the story, but his is a very exceptional tale that was not very common at all. The regime ended in 1979 when the Vietnamese army defeated the Khmer Rouge forces, many of whom then fled to Thailand, where they were welcomed by the government, as the government saw them as a handy buffer against communist Vietnam. The Khmer Rouge continued to fight against Vietnam and the new regime that was installed in what is now Cambodia right up until 1989. And it wasn't really until 1993 that the monarchy was properly restored and the Kingdom of Cambodia, as we know it today, was installed. Cambodia is a much safer, more pleasant place than it was back then, obviously, but it's not the freest country in the world either. When I was there, I wasn't able to watch any political satire online. Clips or websites were simply just not available. That was a bit of a pity because Donald Trump wasn't long in office at that point, and there was really some satirical gold coming from the United States at that point. But that's pretty trivial. A friend of a United States colleague at the course was arrested for flying a drone over a march in Phnom Penh. He was kept for a week and was petrified the entire time. That is not trivial. He was released, of course, but it was a scarring experience for him. China's influence in the country is unquestionable. They are firmly established. In 2014, two former Khmer Rouge leaders were sentenced to life imprisonment by the court. But it's hardly justice, really, is it? The process itself, the justice process is not over yet. So let's just wait and see what will come of it.